My husband was Valery Chalidze from this city, Akhaltsihi. He was a great man. He was born and raised in Moscow. He was a physicist by profession, and he was a brilliant physicist. But there came a time when he felt a moral obligation to try and make his country a better place. So he studied law for 2 years while he was head of a physics laboratory in Moscow. He studied Soviet and international law as they pertain to human rights. Then he founded the Moscow Human Rights Committee, the purpose of which was to offer free legal advice not only to people whose rights had been violated, but also to the Soviet government itself. He was not just involved in individual cases, he was a statesman of great stature, and he wanted to start a dialogue with the Soviet dictatorship, a two-way dialogue among equals about how the country should be governed. Of course, in the Soviet era, this was a very dangerous thing to do. He was a very brave man, in addition to being very smart. And I might add, very good looking, like Georgian men are. He kept doing this work. He risked death by torture every day for years to defend the rights of strangers. His legal analyses were brilliant, and his approach was new. It was innovative. It was simply that the government should obey its own laws, and we, the people, we the dissidents, must also obey the law. No one is above the law. That was his basic premise. And of course, the KGB hated him for it. They harassed him, they interrogated him, they followed him. They made it very difficult for him to live. But he kept living his life as a free man, even though he was not in a free country. He lived as if he were in a free country. Eventually, this got him in trouble with the Soviet government. The KGB talked a lot about him, they studied about him, and ultimately the Supreme Soviet decided to exile my husband to the West, to kick him out of the country. I believe that one can tell the quality of a country in part by the quality of the people that it kicks out. And he was a very high quality person. So they kicked him out to the West, and he ended up in America, in the United States. Even then, he did not stop his human rights work. He kept working in the West. He kept defending people in the Soviet Union as best he could. He made a great contribution to civilization through his legal strategies. And once he was in the West, he was even able to influence the American government to pay more attention to human rights violations in the Soviet Union. It was partly Valery Chalidze's work that led the United States to negotiate with the Soviet Union to exchange spies for human rights prisoners, for political prisoners, so that people whose rights were being violated in the Soviet Union would be released from the country. My husband also helped advise American presidents, both Democratic and Republican. He would go to the White House and advise American presidents, the American government, on what its foreign policy should be toward the Soviet Union. He had a great mind. He was a genius. I say that without exaggeration. He was a genius. His physics work included expansion of our understanding on the role of mass and electric charge in the vortex theory of matter. He had a Renaissance intellect. He was interested in everything. Once we got married and moved to the state of Vermont in the United States, he decided, based on his Georgian love of horses, that he wanted to raise Arabian horses. And so he did. We raised Arabian horses. He continued to publish. He continued to write. He wrote many books. And so his life made a real difference to a great many people. Here is the thought that I would like to leave you with, that Valery Chalitza's work right now, today, has great relevance in Georgia. Georgia needs his help now, and I'm trying to make that available. Georgia has done a wonderful job as an independent country, building democracy, building toward a civil society. And Valery Chalitza's approach to legal development, respect and admire the work that you have done since declaring and fighting for and winning your independence. You do have a little ways to go yet. You've made great progress. My personal opinion, and that's all it is that it would be very beneficial to Georgia. It would help protect Georgia if you were to become a member of the European Union. I think that would help you in many ways. And in order to do that, there are a few legal changes that you need to make. And I am trying to help you with those also. But I think you can do it, and I think you're almost there. So please accept my admiration and my thanks for being the country that you are and the people that you are, and fighting this fight that you're doing and doing such a beautiful job. And also, by the way, thank you for producing my husband. My husband wrote a lot. He wrote letters. He also did a radio program. His focus was more broadly on the Soviet Union as a whole, rather than any particular part of it, although he loved Georgia very much, and he was Georgian. I will show you a picture of him. It's a wonderful picture. He was a handsome Georgian man. He worked, actually, he wrote with Gorbachev. He corresponded with Gorbachev on how Gorbachev might make this transition from a dictatorship to a democratic society. We all know the fate of that and how that turned out. But there are strategic things that a country can do to help make that transition. My husband, Chalitza, came from a very small family here in Akhaltsikhe, very small family. And unfortunately, when he was exiled, he was cut off. He became a non-person in the Soviet Union. And that was a very sad thing. Sorry. But he has left many letters. I have donated his archive to the National Parliamentary Library of Georgia in Tbilisi. So his notes, his letters, his books, and so forth are in Tbilisi now in the National Parliamentary Library. He also, by the way, was a jeweler. He made beautiful jewelry, and there's a few samples of his jewelry also in the library. My heart is very full to be here in Akhaltsikhe. Today I met Gela Chalitza, who turns out to be a relative of my husband. So I have indeed found family here. I also have been hoping to find the graves of my husband's ancestors. We haven't had too much luck there yet, but we're still trying.